Washington brings clarity to the news coming out of Washington, D.C.
The American people must stay informed on what our government is doing.
Exposing Washington with Walker Wildman brings you the inside scoop of what's happening at our nation's capital.
We must take our country back.
Each Saturday at 2:30 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis.
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you suggesting that they're racist or they're...
Yes.
If Republicans weren't so racist, those people who are supporting what he's doing here are racist, period.
Anybody who votes for and supports a racist is a racist.
25% of the country, whether it's 25, 20, 30%, are hardcore racist. They do not want to see brown people coming into America.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, and welcome to a brand new broadcast of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Prediction I made has come true. Breaking news that Anthony Kennedy is going to retire from the United States Supreme Court. We're going to talk about this at the first segment. That's going to be critically important. I got some thoughts I want to share with you about that. But I honestly felt like the decisions that Anthony Kennedy was joining here in the last month, that this was a guy that was trying to cement his legacy. He voted with the conservative majority in 4 or 5 absolutely critical cases. It was kind of unlike him, especially on the ones that involved homosexual rights. He's always been a guy. Homosexuals can discriminate against anybody they want, and Christians just have to suck it up and take it. That's what he's always done his career. Now, in the last month, all of a sudden he's finding that Christians have constitutional rights, that their rights are not to be infringed either. So I felt he was doing that because he was on the verge of retirement, and that has been announced today. We'll talk more about that.
It's really funny because you were just mentioning that this morning in our meeting. Out of nowhere, you just mentioned that.
Well, and you notice they timed it for 1 o'clock.
Yeah, that's
just
true.
so I could lead.
That's true.
So Fox says, hey, we've been listening to that Fisher guy. He predicted this. Let's go ahead and do him a solid, and we'll break the news right at the top of his show.
I think we need to check your office for bugs, just to make sure.
I've been eavesdropping. So anyway, of course, we're just teasing about that. But anyway, glad to have you in the conversation. And we want to turn our attention as we start the program today to the book of Isaiah, which is where our reading has taken us. You can follow along with us at pray.afa.net, pray.afa.net. Now, this is chapters 11 and 12 in the book of Isaiah, and it's kind of an interesting prophetic promise that Isaiah begins with in chapter 11. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David, so this is just a figure of speech for the nation of Israel. And what Isaiah sees is that Jesse has been turned into a stump, been cut down to nothing. You know, we've got some stumps in our yard. We had a lot of trees we wanted to trim because we were just overrun with leaves and we couldn't get enough sun on the lawn. So we hired a guy to come in and cut down about 6 or 7 trees. We still got the stumps there. We had some of them ground up and replanted with grass and all that kind of stuff. But we still got a couple of very prominent stumps sitting there by the side of our driveway, and we put little bird baths on them and stuff like that. But what Isaiah sees is that the nation of Israel was like one of those stumps that had been cut down virtually to the ground. Now, I've never seen a stump grow out of one of the trees that we have cut down, although sometimes you will see a little shoot that will come out near the roots, down near where the soil is, and that little shoot will start to grow out of the side of the tree. And that's what Isaiah is seeing here. It's a sign of new life. A branch from his roots shall bear fruit, referring here to the coming of the Messiah. But there's kind of a second lesson here I think we need to take away from this, and that is sometimes what life can do to us, what had happened to the nation of Judah. Sometimes it can even be our fault, but our lives just get cut down to virtually nothing. Maybe you've had that happen to you, just cut off and cut down to where there is barely any signs of life left. There's nothing but a little tiny shoot, a little tiny branch. That's the only living thing you can find in your life that's still there and is still alive. Well, here's the promise. God can take that thing. If you're patient, you keep your eyes fixed on him. He tells us in verse 3 that this Messiah, his delight shall be in the fear of the Lord, the reverenced respect for the Lord. So if you rebuild your life by concentrating on the fear and respect and reverence for the Lord, God will rebuild. He will regrow your life. He will produce fruit from this little shoot. And that's what he was going to do for the kingdom of Judah. And here's the description of the Messiah in verse 3. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. And we're going to pray this back to God, and we're going to ask Christ to bestow on us the same Spirit that was on him. The Spirit that was on Christ was the Spirit of the Lord. It was a spirit of wisdom. That's an understanding of life. It's a very practical term. The ability to decide a way forward, to decide what the best plan of action is. That's the Spirit that's on him. The Spirit of understanding, that's literally the Spirit to separate things, to see between things, to make distinctions between things, so you're not fooled by things that look like each other, but in reality aren't. It's discernment. It's insight. The Messiah had that. He also had a spirit of counsel and might. Now, a spirit of counsel is what you need when a friend of yours needs some help, needs some guidance, needs a word. Spirit of counsel is what enables us to do that. A spirit of might, where we have the strength to face anything that life throws at us. The spirit of might. That spirit was on Christ. We're going to ask him to put that spirit on us. The spirit of knowledge, that is the knowledge of the Word of God, the knowledge of the truth, to grow in understanding and the embrace of true knowledge, which begins, says, with the fear of the Lord. Now here's the interesting thing. He says in verse 4, not only will his delight be in the fear of the Lord, he shall not judge by what his eyes see or decide disputes by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor. You know what the world always wants us to do is they want us to make our decisions, to decide how we think about things based on images, superficial and shallow and deceptive images. That's what the world is doing on the border today. What they're doing on the border is trying to convince us to believe errors and lies based on the images, the compelling images that we see. But maturity is not to be deceived by what we see, not to believe the lies that we hear, but to judge based on righteousness and truth. And let's ask the Lord to give us that spirit that was on him. Let's go to prayer. Lord Jesus, we worship you this day as the branch from the root of Jesse that bears fruit for the Lord God Almighty. The Spirit of the Lord rests on you. You manifest in full measure the spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the spirit of counsel and of power, the spirit of knowledge. In your incarnation, you delighted in the fear of the Lord. We know that you do not judge by what you see with the eye or hear with the ear, but that you judge the needy with righteousness and give decisions for the poor of the earth with justice. I pray that your spirit will rest on me and my family, the listening audience of Focal Point and AFR. on every man, woman, and child in this land, and on our president, President Trump. Grant us the full measure of your spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and power, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of you. May we delight in the fear of the Lord. Teach us not to judge by what we see with our eyes, but with righteousness and justice. Amen.
Dan Celia of Financial Issues.
I think income ultimately is the most important thing that we protect. I know one thing, and I know this from sitting across a lot of tables from a lot of people over the years, that at some point in time, maybe it's 75, maybe it's 85, there will be a point in time where the only thing you care about is how much income you have coming in. Don't let your portfolio be 100% subject to the volatility in the markets or dependent upon the market. Shore up some permanent income, along with Social Security and your maybe a pension. Have some charitable gift annuity to shore that up. I hope you'll call the AFA Foundation today and find out more detail about a charitable gift annuity.
Call and speak with a representative of the AFA Foundation at 800-326-4543, extension 345.
For the time is coming when people will not endure sound teaching, but having itching ears, they will accumulate for themselves teachers to suit their own passions. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Minute. Trinity Western University, a Canadian evangelical Christian school, has been denied accreditation for its law school because it has a student code of conduct that includes abstinence outside of heterosexual marriage. The Canadian Supreme Court, in 2 rulings, concluded Trinity Western could be denied accreditation because their code of conduct would impede LGBT plus students from attending the law school, and those who attended would be at risk of significant harm. Canadian diversity and tolerance doesn't include Christians.
Listen each weekday from 5 to 6 p.m. Central for the Hamilton Corner with Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy, and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Your congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent host, Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity. And as always, and this is the American Family Radio Network, the most dangerous radio network in all of America. Now, I am honored to have in studio one of my favorite people in all the world, Abe Hamilton. He is the general counsel here at American Family Association, and it's like Abe and I have a mind meld going when it comes to the Constitution and justice. I finally found somebody who is a soul brother when it comes to the issues of the Constitution. So I've invited Abe to come in here. I just sprung this on him as he was walking out the door. But Abe, I wanted to spend a few minutes kicking around this retirement of Anthony Kennedy with you. We just found out about it. It's going to be effective July 31. So anyway, welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Good to have you in studio.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just stopped by to make sure you heard the news.
Yeah, and now you're going to help us process it. So tell me what your initial reaction is.
My initial reaction is that President Trump now gets the opportunity to fill another vacancy on the court. I think to date, by and large, all of us who are interested in strict constructionist interpretation of the Constitution, generally speaking, have been pleased with Justice Neil Gorsuch. So if President Trump holds to form, we get the opportunity to experience something potentially that we didn't even get to experience during the era of Justice Scalia, having a more than 4 block of conservative strict constructionists on the high court. Now we have the potential to have possibly 5 solid strict constructionists, constitutionally faithful Supreme Court justices, which we have not had in well over 40 years in this country.
You know, and I think Anthony Kennedy, my thought at the time, I mentioned this as we were processing these late-breaking Supreme Court decisions, where Anthony Kennedy was just blowing me away because he was on the right side of every important ruling. And I thought, you know, this guy's going out. And he wants to go out with a bang. He wants to go out kind of voting with the conservative bloc to cement whatever he thinks his legacy is. But, you know, Abe, we've talked about this. Anthony Kennedy was on the wrong side of the worst Supreme Court decisions that have been made since 1996.
That is absolutely factual.
Yeah, he was on the wrong side of the Romer v. Evans.
Yes.
That was the amendment in Colorado that prevented school children from being propagandized.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote the majority opinion in that. He wrote the majority opinion in Lawrence v. Texas.
It gave a constitutional right to same-sex sodomy.
Yeah, to sodomy, and overturned all the state laws that, I mean, virtually every state in the Union had laws against sodomy at that time. Then he he was the author of the opinion in Obergefell.
Yep.
Came down on the completely wrong side of that one. So he's been on the wrong side of a lot of really, really important issues. So it opens up the possibility that some of those decisions could have gone 5-4 the other way.
Yeah, and I would add into that, although I celebrate, and I said this in my program, the victory for Jack Phillips personally, the court was presented with an opportunity to strike a broad brush blow for religious freedom and the First Amendment protections with Jack Phillips' case. And I believe Anthony Kennedy laid out the breadcrumbs that would allow state governments and other entities that want to be hostile towards Christian liberty by encouraging them, well, if you just be a little bit more civil, a little bit more discreet in your hostility towards Christianity, then you may be able to make it across the finish line. And just following that up, there was a state court in Arizona that used the Masterpiece Cake Shop to rebuke artists in Arizona
the wedding invitation.
That's exactly right, in the Brush and Nib case.
Now, let me ask you a quick question about this. I want to get back to Anthony Kennedy, but the Supreme Court sent the Barronelle Stutzman case, the florist, who likewise got hammered by the state of Washington. They sent her case back to the Washington State Supreme Court and said basically you need to, I don't know what the proper word would be, but you need to reconsider this case in light of the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling. And I want to see where you think that's going to wind up. I mean, the Attorney General in Washington was very clearly had the same kind of overt and outright hostility that the Civil Rights Commission in Colorado did. So do you think the Washington State Supreme Court is going to take this as a slap on the wrist and reverse themselves on that?
I hope so. What I'm more concerned about is whether or not the Washington State Court will try to parse this between official actions of overt religious hostility, meaning that, yes, there are evidentiary statements made in the record, generally speaking, from the Attorney General from the state of Washington, but the question, I believe, could be narrowly defined or could narrowly turn on whether or not he did so acting in his official capacity. Anthony Kennedy made great effort to highlight the fact that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission displayed their overt hostility toward Jack Phillips' Christian faith on the record during the civil rights hearing processes. I think that they could try to parse this as saying that even if the Attorney General displayed this animus in his personal capacity, did that influence his professional activity as the Attorney General? And I'm concerned that they would try to parse it that way as opposed to clearly seeing the First Amendment as the broad line basis, as Justice Thomas argued and other justices on the court concurred with the state of Washington.
Now, see, my question would be, why would if the Supreme Court was going to give him or give that court the opportunity to kind of wiggle through the little loopholes that they had created, why would they even send the case back to them? It seems to me that it was a rebuke of their ruling, that your ruling is out of alignment with the Masterpiece Cake Shop ruling, and we want you to bring those two things into alignment. That's why I would read it.
I hope so. I hope you're right. I don't know, maybe I'm just too skeptical. Maybe I'm jaded. I don't know.
Well, I know what you mean.
I absolutely hope you're right.
Yeah, we've had enough judicial creativity and innovation to last us for a lifetime. But let's get back to Justice Anthony Kennedy. Guy was on the wrong side of all of these major rulings. So we could wind up with a lot of cases that would still be 5-4 because he voted, for instance, with the conservatives on the union case and some of the other cases that were breaking late here in the term. So we've got 51 Republicans right now, and that's all that you need to confirm the next Supreme Court justice, because Mitch McConnell had the wisdom to see on Supreme Court justices, we got to get rid of that fake-a-buster.
Yeah.
He won't get rid of it for anything else, But they got rid of it. Harry Reid got rid of it for appeals court nominations, and Mitch McConnell and the Republicans got rid of it for Supreme Court nominations. They could get rid of it this afternoon, Abe, if they wanted to.
Sure could.
They can change the rules with 51 votes, so they could get rid of that fake-a-buster. Trump has been pounding them about that for months, and we have too. So they got 51 senators, and Jeff Flake is out there saying, I'm going to block every judicial nomination that Trump brings up. I'm going to vote against it until we get a vote on tariffs. He says he's got some other Republicans that are willing to join him. Seems to me it'd just be catastrophic for Jeff Flake. I mean, he doesn't have a political career to worry about, but just from a PR standpoint, I don't see how they could afford to vote against a Trump nominee, especially if the guy was in the mold of Gorsuch.
It's easy to talk tough like that when you don't have the bright lights of a Supreme Court justice seat on the table. And even if Jeff Flake, who, as you rightly cited, doesn't have a political future because he's retiring, holds the line, I would like to see what Republicans would join him in that. Because if it's just him and it comes to 50-50, then we have Mike Pence who comes in and breaks that tie. But it's easy to say that when you don't have a seat open. Now that you have Anthony Kennedy announcing his retirement, I would like to see what Republicans will join this mutiny sponsored by Jeff Flake.
Well, I'll guarantee you Flake is going to get probed. I mean, he's going to get asked directly, frequently, often, and loudly if he's going to keep his pledge to block Trump's judicial nominees when it comes to this one. That seems to me that's going to be a kind of a bridge too far, even for a guy like Jeff Flake. But anyway, Abe, what it opens up is the possibility that, Clarence Thomas is a reliable conservative vote. John Roberts has been a little bit flaky, but he seems to be kind of coming back into line. You can count on Sam Alito. We can count on Neil Gorsuch. We got to a situation where we had, like you were saying, 5 justices that you could count on them to be originalists and strict constructionists in the mode of Antonin Scalia. Man, we would have a whole new day of liberty in America.
I mean, and I don't want to be premature, but it could very well result in the overturning of Roe versus Wade, because you have all of these 15-week bans. You have Mississippi's 15-week ban. You have other abortion bans that are ripe for challenge in the courts, and lawsuits have been filed in a couple of them in the courts. And so as that would make its way up to the high court, if it does so with 5 reliable conservative justices, we could see Roe versus Wade into the dustbins of history.
Wow, that could be something. And I know that the 15-week ban, that was crafted by the people, by the legal experts that put that thing together. That was crafted in part to create a challenge to Roe v. Wade, because none of the 20-week bans were challenged. And I think it's because they knew that they would lose. And maybe the same thing will happen with the 15-week ban. But if either a 15-week ban or a 20-week ban is challenged in court, it would be destined to go to the Supreme Court, I would think, unless you'd have appeals court trying to sabotage it, trying to keep it from going anywhere, try to bottle up or something like that.
And even if they did try that, they cannot prevent the Supreme Court from intervening and granting certiorari. So they could try it.
Yeah.
You see some of the front runners.
Oh yeah, I don't. Do you know, Abe, anybody come to your mind as somebody who would be a leading candidate?
Well, I would immediately go back to the list that President Trump provided before, but I would think right off the top of my head, one of his more recent appellate court judges who've been confirmed, who have gone through the gauntlet. Kelly Coney Barrett, I think, would be a good person to fill the role. She just got appointed to an appellate court. She's already been through the confirmation process, and so you would have the argument that you guys just confirmed this woman, have found her to be a solid jurist. How could you now reverse course on a nomination that you just agreed to not too long ago?
Well, I will flat out guarantee you that the wheels are spinning and churning in Trump's camp, consulting with the Federalist Society. We played the soundbite from Leonard Leo, the vice president of the Federalist Society. They put together the list for Trump, and they said they've got the top 21 to 25 conservative jurists that are serving right now in the federal judiciary. Those names, or maybe they're not, but they are eligible, should be, got those names in front of Donald Trump. So they're going to be working on picking the best name out of that batch, and could be fun to watch.
Could be fun to watch. I think I said Kelly Coney. I meant Amy Coney Barrett. Is what I meant.
Yeah, and she got hammered for her faith in the hearing and survived. So I think she's Roman Catholic.
She is.
It'd be nice to get a Protestant on there somewhere. because but the jurists that have been on there as Catholics, like Anthony Scalia, great jurist, Clarence Thomas, terrific jurist. We'd be happy to have another one just like that. All right, Abe, thanks for letting me Shanghai you for a few
no
minutes.
problem.
All right.
Spontaneous interview.
Yeah. All right, you are listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Glad to have Abe Hamilton in studio to help us break down some of the implications of the Anthony Kennedy retirement announcement today. And again, our gratitude to Abe again for coming in. Be right back.
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. One of the many bonuses of being a seminary president is that you have the opportunity to interact with and then learn from bright seminary students who become seminary graduates and scholars who you end up learning from as well as having taught them. I had such an experience recently in attending the annual meeting of the International Society of Christian Apologetics in Georgia. There I heard one of SES's former students, Phil Fernandez, deliver a paper on the death of man and the death of Western civilization. I cannot tell you how gratifying it was to see a former SES student do such a magnificent job of dissecting the philosophical disease afflicting Western man. Fernandez began by pointing out that German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche predicted that God is dead at the end of the 19th century. He then quotes philosopher Peter Crift's assessment of Nietzsche's belief, quote, "One need not share Nietzsche's atheism to agree with his historical, not theological dictum that God is dead, i.e., that faith in God is dead as a functional center for Western civilization, that we are now a planet detached from its sun. One need not share Nietzsche's refusal of morality and natural laws to agree with his observation that Western man is increasingly denying morality and natural law, that we are well on our way to the brave new world," end quote. Fernandez then points out that the 19th century brought the death of God to Western culture. 20th century brought the death of truth and morality to Western culture. And two great 20th century Christian thinkers, C.S. Lewis and Francis Schaeffer, argued that the death of man will follow, unless, of course, that man repents and turns back to the true God and Creator. Tomorrow we will deal more with Fernandez's analysis and prescription for the return of a flourishing Western civilization. For more information about this and other subjects, or about Southern Evangelical Seminary, or about how you can attend this year's national conference, go to ses.edu. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher
on American Family Radio.
Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
afa.net.
He hits it high. He hits it deep. It is out of here.
And ladies and gentlemen, that is the signal from my team that we have another winnable war moment. I got a question for you, ladies and gentlemen. Are you tired of winning yet? Are you tired of winning yet? Got another...
heard that someplace before.
Yeah, I got another piece of good economic news. Let me find that in here, wherever that is. Has nothing to do with specifically what we're talking about. Well, the blow to the unions is a huge piece of good news. That's a winnable war moment. But I got a piece here from checkyourfact.com. Wages are growing at their fastest rate since 2008. 1 million jobs created over the last 6 months. Consumer confidence is up. Small business owners are optimistic. Record low unemployment, 3.8%. I'm not getting tired of winning. I do not know about you. But our winnable war moment for today is that Anthony Kennedy has announced that he is going to retire, and his last day is going to be July 31. That's the end of this month. And, Jeff, you saw on the Cryon there.
Next month. This is June.
Oh, yeah, June 27th. Yes, next month. Sorry about that. I'm a guy that's, I'm a guy that's always just a month ahead of everybody. You know what I'm saying? I'm out in front of the crowd.
Your calendars are set for paydays.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So anyway, next month he's going to retire. And you were saying on the Cryon on Fox News that Trump is already making his list and checking it twice.
Well, he looks like, from what I read on the screen, that he will be going to that list that he had of conservative judges. I think there was 20 that he originally came up with, he'll be going back to that list.
Yeah, and Leonard Leo from Federalist Society said they got 21 to 25 names on that list right now. So I'm assuming that Trump's going to be one of those.
I think
Trump's going to pick one from that list.
Yeah, I think we need to go back a little bit and let Trump make a statement on this.
And we're going to start winning again. We're going to win so much. We're going to win at every level. We're going to win economically. We're going to win with the economy. We're going to win with military. We're going to win with health care and for our veterans. We're going to win with every single facet. We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore. Mr. President, it's too much. And I'll say, no, it isn't. We have to keep winning. We have to win more. We're going to win more.
High drive. Right field. It is out of here.
It feels good.
Oh, it does. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, this is almost too much for me to take. I mean, 2 days in a row, it has been nothing but good news. This is Winnable War Wednesday. Yeah, some people were saying yesterday, I wish this had happened on Wednesday so we could have Winnable War Wednesday. Well, we do. We've got Winnable War Wednesday, and I am not, to answer President Trump's question, I'm not tired of winning. So this is going to be huge. This is going to be so much fun to follow this, because I will guarantee you that Donald Trump is going to be huddling with his judicial advisors, I mean, this afternoon, going over that list, seeing which names rise to the top, getting his ducks in a row, and he's going to make his pick. I think what Abe Hamilton said was good, to get his pick out there and introduce that pick just right away, get the ball rolling. You know the Democrats are going to try to throw everything under the wheels that they can to try to derail this thing, stop it in its tracks. But there in reality is not a single thing that they can do. Mitch McConnell's in charge of the agenda and the calendar in the Senate. They've got 51 senators. If they can keep Jeff Flake from flaking out and all the Republicans stay together, there's not a thing that the Democrats can do to stop it. Now, this is kind of an X factor I hadn't thought about. John McCain is not on the Senate floor. He's still in Arizona. I don't know if he's ever going to get back to the Senate floor. And so that means that they're down one senator. They've got 50 senators right now, not 51. If Jeff Flake flakes, that means they only get 49 votes, and Mike Pence cannot break the tie. He can create a tie, but he cannot break it. So they would lose if Jeff Flake does what he says he's going to do. And again, this goes back to what I said about what they did to Judge Moore. When they bagged that guy, they sandbagged that guy. They threw him under the bus. They threw him off the train. They threw him to the curb, whatever you want to call it. They could have won that race if they just gotten behind Roy Moore, if they looked at the research that indicated just the complete sham those accusations were, how false they were, how there was nothing to support them. All of the evidence historically and factually militated against those obviously manufactured accusations against Roy Moore. They could have won that and had 52. And Roy Moore would be a great guy to help them sort through which of these candidates would be the best candidate to become a Supreme Court justice. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is just gonna be fun. Now, I think Donald Trump is getting ready to speak fairly quickly, maybe even talking now about the Anthony Kennedy retirement, and I'm sure he's going to be declaring his intention to put another Neil Gorsuch type strong conservative jurist, an originalist, a strict constructionalist on the court that will be a complement to Neil Gorsuch and to Sam Alito and to Clarence Thomas and even to John Roberts when he's paying attention to the Constitution instead of his press clippings. So anyway, good news, ladies and gentlemen. Great to hear, and we'll see if we can pick up on some of what Donald Trump is going to have to say about Justice Kennedy's retirement. So a lot of speculation about this. It always ramps up in the summer between sessions. You've got Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She's in her 80s. She's been in frail health for some time. Stephen Breyer is also in his 80s. Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, they're young. That was intentional on Barack Obama's part, so they'll be on the court for decades. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. He's picking young jurists for appellate courts. He'll probably try to pick a jurist that's in his 50s at least, like Neil Gorsuch, I believe, is 51. Pick somebody in his 50s to take Anthony Kennedy's place on the Supreme Court, a judge who will be there for decades. I mean, you will never hear as much grinding of the teeth, as much weeping and wailing as you are going to hear from the Democrats over the course of the next couple of months. Media just crowding into the Oval Office. I mean, and they got microphones in Trump's face. I mean, this is going to be a huge deal. You know, for a day or two, this is going to kind of sweep the whole immigration stuff kind of off the front pages.
That's a good thing. But, you know, you think about all the media in there, it's just like vultures. They're trying to find anything he says they can use against him.
Yeah.
It's amazing at the hate for this man.
Well, and there'll be a lot of questions, you know, about packing the court, and FDR tried to do that, and you shouldn't be doing that, and is that what you're doing? Well, of course, he's not doing anything of the sort. He's got a vacancy to fill, and he's filling it.
Yeah.
So,
well, it does look like the search is going to begin immediately, is the words from Trump.
Who was that with him in the
I don't know.
Oval
I was
Office
trying
there?
to figure that out, too.
I don't recognize that guy. So anyway, he was making noises like this is says we have an excellent list of potential justices. So they're working on that list right now. Man, this is a good day to be a conservative, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see. Yesterday this week, we had the ruling on the Barronelle Stutzman case.
Yes, the travel ban.
We had a ruling on the travel ban. Did we have something else?
Yeah, there was 4. One on the global warming suit.
Global warming getting shut down. That was a federal judge, not Supreme Court.
Yeah, and the other one was the Planned Parenthood doesn't, pregnancy centers don't have to display.
They can't be compelled to promote abortion. And then today we had the unions were swatted down. This is a huge victory. You know, and by the way, let's say they accuse Trump of packing the court. You know what our response is? What we heard from the Democrats. Elections have consequences.
Yep.
You know what Barack Obama said? Elections have consequences. You lost. Remember that when Barack Obama said that? And that's the message now for the howling brood of Democrats.
Now,
and
who appointed Kennedy? Was that Reagan?
It was Reagan. Well, and he appointed him in place of Bork.
Oh.
Because Bork got borked.
Yeah.
Bork was Scalia before there was a Scalia.
Yeah.
Bork, if you had Bork on oh man, what a jurist he would have been. He was eloquent. He was brilliant. He was educated beyond anybody else on the court. And they just borked him. I mean, they were out there telling malicious lies about him, creating a picture, a dystopian view of what America would be like under Robert Bork. And so they bagged him. And he got knocked out of contention. And so Ronald Reagan, to be safe, tried to pick somebody that was kind of middle of the road that wouldn't get much objection, and that's where he picked Anthony Kennedy. And then Kennedy went badly off the rails on the entire homosexual agenda. I will guarantee you, if Robert Bork had been on the Supreme Court instead of Anthony Kennedy, you still would not be able to propagandize school children about the homosexual agenda in Colorado. All of the states that had marriage amendments in their state constitutions, like the one that we got through in Idaho, there were 32 of them, they would all still be on the books. There would be no such thing as homosexual marriage in America. Sodomy would still be against the law in most states. All of that would be the case. So you talk about, the importance of making a good pick with a Supreme Court jurist. That gives you an illustration of what's at stake. Well, anyway, and by the way, just back to the union thing for a minute, why this is so important. This has to do with public sector unions as well. Public sector unions, to me, are particularly egregious. Now, I don't mind private sector unions. I mean, that's up to the workers. You know, if they want to collectively get together and bargain together for wages instead of letting each worker strike his own deal with management, that's fine. That's up to them. Now, the problem is, to be fair, that manufacturers and employers ought to be able to do exactly the same thing. They should be able to get together and decide what they're going to do in terms of a wage and salary structure. So the auto owners, those that own the auto companies, they should be able to get together. The Fords and the GMs get together and decide what they're going to pay everybody. If the workers can do it, the employers ought to be able to do the same thing, but they won't let them do that, which is fundamentally unfair. But I think public sector unions is a particularly bad idea because they are paid with our money. And I'll explain when we come back why that is a particularly bad idea. You're listening to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Another segment of content. We'll start taking calls in the second hour. We'll be right back.
What Solomon is saying here is, remember, God is in heaven and he sees everything. You are on earth and your vision is very limited. If you could see what God sees, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying. That's what Solomon is teaching us.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Searching for Heaven on Earth next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
This is Life Issues with Brad Mattis, president of Life Issues Institute.
A top health official from the U.S. Agency for International Development appears to be blaming women for the world's conflicts and wars. Carrie Pelsman said family planning was important for peace and security in other countries. They believe countries with youth bulges are more prone to conflicts. Attendees were told it's all about giving women access to family planning to achieve peace, which of course includes abortion. They say over 200 million women in developing countries have an unmet need for these services. However, less than 5% of them cite access for not using family planning, and even less cite lack of knowledge of the product. Perhaps the women believe children are a blessing from God and the future of their countries.
Follow us on Twitter at Life Issues USA and stay informed, more informed than you've ever been.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
He hits it high. He hits it deep. It is out of here. He's done it again.
Done it again. Too much winning, ladies and gentlemen. Almost can't handle it. So great news for today. Good day. What a good day to be a conservative. And let me get back to the union thing, why this is so good. Supreme Court said that unions can no longer collect dues from workers that do not want to belong to the union. Now, the union's position has always been, look, we negotiate wages and salaries for everybody. So these people that don't want to pay their dues, they're still benefiting. So they need to be compelled to pay the dues, even though they're not members of the union. Even though they don't want us to represent them, they still need to pay dues. So that's fundamentally unfair. This is just going to shatter unions pretty much. And the good thing, and in public sector, let me get to the public sector union. This is teachers' unions and stuff like that. Teachers' unions is the worst. I want to be sure you understand I have no problem with teachers. My problem is with the teachers' unions. I got a big problem with the teachers' unions. But the problem with a public sector union, like a teachers' union, is they are being paid with our money. So when they go to the bargaining table to try to negotiate an increase in compensation, who is going to cough up the money in that increase? It's going to be you and me. Now, if you have the auto workers at Ford and they go into the boardroom to negotiate with the management at Ford and they want to raise in pay, the Ford people, they look at their books, they look at their process, they look at what their profit margins are, and they decide how much they are able to grant of what the employees are seeking. And so they negotiate. Ford's negotiating with its own money. So they're going to be careful. But when the teachers union goes in there, they're not negotiating with their own money. They're negotiating with our money. And yeah, the lawmakers across the table for them are supposed to represent us, but it's not their money that's on the line. It's our money. So they are negotiating, deciding how much of a raise they can give. They're negotiating with our money, and we're not there to represent our own interests at the table. So public sector unions in particular, I believe, an absolutely terrible, terrible idea, and particularly compulsory dues. And one of the reasons it's particularly horrible is that probably 90% of the candidates that unions support with their dues are Democrats. They lean left. So they give millions and millions and millions of dollars to Democratic candidates. So you have this deal where people who are forced to donate to a union they don't want to belong to and watch their compulsory dues go to support candidates they would never vote for. So there's everything wrong about this. So this is a huge win for liberty. It's a huge win for freedom of choice. Workers now can decide whether they want to belong to a union. They can decide whether they want to pay union dues and all that. I never belonged to a union. I worked one summer job where it was a union plant, as a steel and wire plant. And I remember, Jeff, now you've been part of unions, correct?
Yeah, a couple of them. Yeah. I was in the Culinary and Bartenders Union in Las Vegas. You had to be in that to work in any of the hotels.
Yeah, you couldn't get a job unless you were part of the union, pretty much.
That's
and you had compulsory dues.
And then in construction as well, there was the Carpenters Union. That was, you could join that. You could work on the hotels and the major commercial type buildings and stuff like that. If you didn't, you were going to work in residential and make far less money. So that was kind of a choice.
Well, I remember, there was a union at the place I worked, and I just worked there for the summer, so I didn't have to join the union at the beginning. But these guys didn't know, and I was there after I'd been there for a couple of months, man, about 5 or 6 of them. They corralled me one day, and, man, I'm telling you, it was ominous.
Yeah.
I mean, they corralled me about not joining the union and not paying dues, and there wasn't a direct threat, but, man, I'm telling you, there was an implied threat, and I got it.
Yeah.
I received the threat. And fortunately, I was in my last month. In fact, at the end of that summer is when I got married, so that's what I left that job for, is to get married. So I was able to kind of escape the jaws of the union.
Yeah, that was true in Las Vegas as well, in the Culinary and Bartenders Union. I'm not going to say it actually did happen, but there was a lot of suspicion even within the union that it had very close ties with the mafia. And I mean, there were a lot of restaurants in Las Vegas that were built by the Culinary Union, that were owned and built by the Culinary Union.
Yeah, you can just imagine. All right, so anyway, I mean, I can hardly get off of this topic here because it's just so much fun.
Well, keep going.
Think about it.
I don't think we're tired of winning yet, are we?
Well, I don't know what else I want to say about it. I just am enjoying kind of bathing in like sitting in a hot tub and turning the jets on, and it's just soothing your whole body.
Yeah.
So
like home runs from your team.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I can imagine the opposite happening to those on the left right now, though. Do you remember the inauguration where you saw a lot of people yelling and gnashing their teeth? I bet there's some of that going on.
Well, you look at the parables of Jesus when he's talking about hell, and, most of what we know about hell, we learn from the teaching of Jesus. Jesus talked more about hell than any other figure in the Bible. So, I mean, that's gentle Jesus, meek and mild. He's the one that's giving us all the information about where we wind up if we do not bow the knee before the rightful king of the universe. But, one of the phrases he used frequently in there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, that's what you will see and hear and observe in hell. And, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, if you want to know what Jesus was talking about, just watch what happens to the left now, the complete, total apocalyptic, aneurysmic meltdown on the part of the left. It's going to be spectacular.
We won't have a shortage of clips tomorrow from the left.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
We won't. Well, you know, we got some clips from the left today that we can play that'll kind of give you an idea of maybe what we are in for. Let's just play clip number 1 if we can, Rob. You know, because we've seen that the Democrats have labeled Donald Trump the enemy. I mean, they're using Hitler analogies, Hitler comparisons. You know, we were meeting the other day, our Action Alert team meeting on Monday morning, and Ed Vitagliano pulled out Godwin's Law. And Godwin's Law says that the longer a debate goes on, the higher the odds will be that somebody is going to invoke a Hitler comparison. In fact, the odds approach 1 that you'll get that the longer the debate goes on. Well, we know that the talking snake media has demonized Donald Trump from the beginning. Now, here's an example. This is just a montage. It goes for about 1 minute and 18 seconds. It's just a montage of members of the talking snake media demonizing Donald Trump, making Donald Trump enemy number 1.
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis, going, you here, you here. And I think we now have to flip it, and it's a given the evilness of Donald Trump.
If you hold down the woman while the rapist is raping her, and you didn't rape her, are you a rapist?
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you suggesting that they're racist, or
they're... Yes.
The people who vote, all the people who voted for Donald Trump are racist?
Yes.
If Republicans weren't so racist, they could encourage black people who are morally conservative to be on their side.
Those people who are supporting what he's doing here are racist, period.
It's movements and people that are speaking up for things, whether we're talking about civil rights movement, whatever else, those movements should be nonviolent, but they should not be non-confrontational.
And so these policies that this administration is putting forth are intentionally cruel, they are racist, and it is our job as citizens to speak out against that. Now, does that mean that we're going to be violent? No. But does that mean that Sarah Sanders can have a nice, quiet dinner with her family when she's taking our tax dollars to implement this policy? I don't think so.
So here's a member of the left. I don't know which member of the talking snake media that was, but she is endorsing what was done to Sarah Sanders and saying she doesn't have a right to enjoy a quiet dinner in peace because of the Nazi that she works for. Now let's grab clip number R1. This is Tucker Carlson, and he makes a pretty important point here about all this Nazi analogy stuff. Let's listen.
Once you decide that the people who disagree with you are Nazis, everything is allowed. Why wouldn't you threaten them in restaurants or burn their houses down, or who knows? This could very well end in tragedy. You start talking like this and you don't know where it's going to go. Some progressives seem to welcome all that. Quentin James, who's the head of a political action committee that supports Democrats, recently announced that those calling for calm are, quote, accomplices of the current administration. Accomplices? This is the language of total war.
This is the language of total war. You know, and we had Representative Steve King. We referred to what he said yesterday, that he believes we are headed toward a civil war. And I think what's going on right here is just going to ratchet that up. Because you look at the reaction that we had to the ruling of the Supreme Court on the Muslim travel ban. My column is about that today. I don't know, Jeff, would you check and see if that's up at the stand yet?
Yeah.
And I had a column yesterday. I was so busy having fun playing home run calls, I even forgot to talk about my column yesterday. So we'll talk about that in the second hour.
Yes, it's up.
Okay, it is up, and the column is on the ruling on the travel ban, which again has been eclipsed now by all this conversation. Ted Cruz being interviewed right now by Fox News. All this conversation about what President Trump is going to do, who he's going to nominate. That's a huge deal. That's what everybody is talking about there. The immigration bill, the compromise immigration bill, has been defeated, by the way, 301 to 121. And this is a perfectly wretched bill. It was a wretched bill. It deserved to go down. It would have provided, ladies and gentlemen, the biggest amnesty in history. 2.2 million undocumented and illegal aliens would have been turned into citizens. This thing should have gone down in absolute flames, and it did. That is another ladies and gentlemen, another winnable war. I'm so tired of winning, I got to take a break. See you in 5 minutes.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
American Family Association. We're here to inform, equip, and activate individuals to strengthen the moral foundations of American culture. Whether it's praying, signing a petition, or emailing leaders, your involvement is needed every day. Because your immediate involvement is crucial, making it fast and easy is crucial as well. Now you can subscribe to specific alerts at afa.net/connect. Register, connect, and get connected.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. Breaking news out of the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Anthony Kennedy plans to retire this summer. The announcement came just hours after the court issued its final opinions. A Reagan appointee, Kennedy has been rumored to be looking at retirement, and sources say now was the time given that Republicans occupy the White House. This will mean President Trump will have made at least 2 nominations to the nation's high court in his first term. Neil Gorsuch was nominated to replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia. More details at onenewsnow.com. There was an argument over civility during a House committee hearing on Capitol Hill. Fox's Rachel Sutherland reports.
Republican Congressman Jeb Henserling said people should not be thrown out of restaurants over their political views.
For those who daily promote diversity, I would call upon them to respect diversity of opinion.
Democrat Maxine Waters, who has called for the public shaming of administration officials, said the lack of civility in political discourse is President Trump's fault.
Mr. Chairman, if you want to talk about civility, you start with the President of the United States.
The dispute happened at a Financial Services Committee hearing where HUD Secretary Ben Carson was set to testify. In Washington, Rachel Sutherland, Fox News.
6-time Olympic medalist Allie Raisman says she has barely been able to work out since going public with allegations of sex abuse at the hands of a former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University sports doctor. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
24-year-old Allie Raisman, during powerful victim impact statements earlier this year, told Larry Nasser,
"Will not rest until every last trace of your influence on this sport has been destroyed."
Raisman now telling the improper Bostonian magazine that she hasn't worked out in months and still regrouping after that confrontation, and that she's constantly reliving her abuse. Nasser pled guilty to molesting women and girls under the guise of treatment for injuries. He's now in prison. Michigan State University has since reached a $500 million settlement with Nasser's victims. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
The police officer who is accused of shooting and killing Antoine Rose will be charged with criminal homicide. Rose was shot when he was running away from a traffic stop by East Pittsburgh officer Michael Rosfeld. Allegheny County DA Stephen Zappala says Rosfeld's story didn't add up and that Rose was not involved in an earlier drive-by shooting that warranted a police presence.
By all accounts, Mr. Rose never did anything in furtherance of any crimes in North Braddock.
Police say Rosfeld fired 3 shots at Rose when he was running from the car he was in. The driver of that car was taken into custody. Police say they found an empty gun clip in Rose's pocket, but no weapon. It was one of the deadliest diseases of the first half of the 20th century, but now the polio virus is an ally in the fight against a deadly form of cancer. Fox's Tom Rigotti reports.
The polio virus has been turned into an immune system therapy to fight deadly brain tumors. Doctors say survival is better than expected for some patients in a small study who were given a modified form of the virus. It helped their bodies attack the cancer. It was the first human test, and the virus didn't help most patients or improve median survival. But researchers say many who did respond seem to have long-lasting benefits. About 21% were alive at 3 years versus 4% in a comparison group of previous brain tumor patients. Tom Rigotti, Fox News.
And officials in Lincoln, Nebraska are inviting residents to help test out an all-electric driverless shuttle bus for a pilot program that could bring more autonomous vehicle services to the city. The public will have a chance to reserve a 15-minute ride on the bus starting Thursday. The shuttle will be conducting trial runs at the Nebraska Innovation Campus in Lincoln until mid-July. Lincoln was loaned the self-driving shuttle with a $100,000 grant. That is American Family News for this hour. For more news and information, including details about the retirement of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy, visit onenewsnow.com.
Caring about the direction our nation is headed is one thing. Doing something about it is another. The Values Voter Summit in Washington, D.C. is the premier gathering for equipping Christian conservatives for returning the culture to one that values human life, encourages families, and defends religious liberty. Plan now to join other values voters on September 21st through the 23rd. Learn more and register at valuesvotersummit.org. valuesvotersummit.org, sponsored in part by AFA Action.
There are still generations of people, older people, who were born and bred and marinated in it, in that prejudice and racism, and they just have to die.
If you vote for Trump, then you, the voter, you, not Donald Trump, are standing at the border like Nazis.
Tens of millions of people voted for him after he showed his cards for years.
But are you, are you suggesting that they're racist or
Yes.
If Republicans weren't so racist, those people who are supporting what he's doing here are racist, period.
Anybody who votes for and supports a racist is a racist.
25% of the country, whether it's 25, 20, 30%, are hardcore racist. They do not want to see brown people coming into America.
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to the second hour of Focal Point on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us, no matter how you happen to be listening. We're going to take phone calls throughout this second hour. Number to call is 888-589-8840. The topic is Anthony Kennedy's retirement. We want to focus the discussion on that topic, the Supreme Court, Anthony Kennedy's retirement, what your reactions to that are, what you hope happens, what you see happening, your prediction about what will happen, anything you've got that's related to the retirement of Anthony Kennedy from the United States Supreme Court. That's what we want to talk about in this second hour. The number is 888-589-8840. And again, we're going to take calls throughout the second hour. So if you call, be prepared to be patient, because we're going to try to get to you one at a time. We've got content we're going to weave in and out as the program develops. Now, I want to talk about immigration just a second, since there have been developments on that. We've been talking about the fact that somebody's going to get killed. The way the left is ratcheting up the rhetoric, somebody's going to get killed. Well, here's a Florida man, freebeacon.com, who was arrested, and he was threatening to kill the children of a Republican congressman. His name is Brian Mast in Florida. Has got 3 children, all of them under the age of 8. And this guy, Lawrence Wayne Key, called his office and said, I am going to find the congressman's kids and I'm going to kill them. If you're going to separate kids at the border, I'm going to kill his kids. Don't try to find me, because you won't.
Oh, so he loves kids.
Loves kids, but he's going to kill your 3 kids.
Yeah, that makes perfect.
And he's an active Democrat, frequently volunteers for local Democratic Party activities and Planned Parenthood. And so that business about the lethal nature of this dialogue, I mean, we're starting to see it. So again, the topic on the table is Anthony Kennedy's retirement. For phone calls, 888-589-8840. I got a column here by Wayne Horiuchi, former legislative advocate, on the Daily Caller. And he says, look, what's going on the border is nothing like the Japanese internment camps, not anything like it. In the Japanese internment camps, you would have 6 extended family members to a room, 5 rooms to a barracks, 24 barracks to a block, and dozens of blocks to a camp. Now, the parents were not separated from the children, but he said, you talk about desolation, you talk about isolation, You talk about harsh existence. His was in Hart Mountain, Wyoming. Internment lasted for as long as 3 years for many of the detainees, not just a matter of 1, 2, or 3 weeks like we have here. And the children are going to be reunited with their parents in short order. And he says, the other thing about it is, look, the residents, the inmates at these Japanese internment camps, they were by and large U.S. citizens. Now let's grab clip number 8. This is Senator Mazie Hirono. She's from Hawaii. The ruling in the internment camp was called the Korematsu ruling because the internment of Japanese in World War II, that was challenged in court. It was something that a Democrat did, by the way. That was FDR did that. He was locking them up in these internment camps. It was challenged. The court ruled that he did have that authority in the interest of national security. And here's Senator Mazie Hirono comparing southern border to Japanese internment camps, clip 8.
And the court ignored all of the comments that the president had made that he had every intention of banning Muslims from our country. So there are no checks and balances. And in fact, if the court is saying, if you don't like our interpretation of the Immigration and Nationality Act, then you, Congress, should fix it. But do you think this Congress is going to fix it? We couldn't even pass comprehensive immigration reform out of the House. So where are the checks and balances? I think the case, the Korematsu case, and the decision to intern 120,000 Japanese Americans on the basis of national security, I think it's an apt analogy.
So she thinks it's an apt analogy, Wayne Horiuchi, and I think Wayne is right on this. It's not an apt analogy. Parents were not separated in the internment camp, and if they were, and their internment could last for 3 years, not 3 weeks, which is the outside distance in the detention centers on the border. And Horiuchi makes the point that most of the Japanese were U.S. citizens that were in these internment camps. They were not illegal aliens. They were people who were legal United States citizens, and because of the fear about what they could do as Japanese with Japanese ancestry is what prompted FDR to contain them. And almost none of the illegal aliens that are coming in the country are employed in American businesses. Few of them serve in the United States military. So, in 1942, the Japanese Americans did not break any government laws. In fact, they willingly complied with orders of the military and of the president. There was visible opposition, but it was not outside of the legal framework. Yet people opposed it, and the way they fought it is they went to court to try to get it overturned. There was no instance of sabotage. There was no instance of espionage by Japanese Americans during all of World War II, even in Hawaii. Government was concerned after Pearl Harbor, but the governor of Hawaii refused to consider or allow internment of Japanese Americans in that state. So the parallels between Japanese internment and the detention camps on the border is not there. Now, my column on this is called Jesus' View of Immigration, Revelation 3:20. And let me share a little bit of the contents of the column. I talk in here about a Christian view of immigration. And I begin with the fact that we need to understand that borders are God's idea. Borders are not man's idea. They are God's idea. So you find in Acts 17:26, we are told that God, quote, made from one man every nation of mankind to live on the face of the earth, having determined, quote, the boundaries of their dwelling place. Boundaries are borders. Now, these borders obviously can change shape through settlement, through purchase or war, but God's sovereignty over human affairs is directing it all. So borders and boundaries, even the ones that exist today, are God's idea, not man's idea. And God's men respected those God-ordained boundaries. When Moses was leading his people through the wilderness toward the promised land, he came to, quote, the edge of the territory, end quote, of Edom. That's the border of Edom. That's a nation. He sought passage. He said to the king of Edom, he even made a play for the king's compassion. You know all the hardship we have met, how the Egyptians dealt harshly with us. And his request was polite. Please let us pass through your land. We will not pass through field or vineyard or drink water from a well. We will not turn aside until we have passed through your territory. He says, look, we're not going to be a drain on your nation's resources. We're not going to go on welfare. We're not going to expect charity when we come in. But Edom would not consent. You shall not pass through. You shall not pass through, he said again. Edom refused to give Israel passage. We'll see what Moses did when we come back.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
The Wedge of Health Freedom is 2 years old. The Wedge is our initiative to restore simplicity, affordability, confidentiality, and a patient-centered focus to medicine in America. Wedge practices take cash, check, or credit card, making care affordable, timely, and patient-friendly. 2 New York doctors have eliminated the middleman. They are not under insurance contract or government control. They have 400 patients and a waiting list. They give patients their undivided attention at an affordable price. They build real relationships, and no one else dictates patient care or how many minutes they can spend with each patient. You can find this kind of doctor at jointhewedge.com. That's jointhewedge.com.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly e-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
One of my favorite things to do in Israel is take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. Hello everyone, I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We'll be taking our annual tour of Israel in March of 2019, but it's time to sign up. We have a lot of folks sign up early, and last year, in fact, we filled up several months in advance. So for all the information on this trip to Israel, a bucket list trip for most people, go to the website twholyland.com. That's twholyland.com, or for a free brochure, call us at 800-FAMILIES. 800-FAMILIES, option 5, and leave us your name and your phone number. We'll be flying direct from the States to Tel Aviv and then begin our tour in Jerusalem of Israel. We hope you can join us in 2019.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Howdy and welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. We're already hearing stories of weeping and wailing. As I told you, Jeff, what meeting was that?
It was Politico's reporting that members at the Democratic National Committee Rules and Bylaws panel.
So they're just freaking out. There's profanity stuff that we can't use on family radio.
A big sigh and ohs and things like that as the news broke.
And woe is us and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. All right, I want to finish just my thoughts on immigration. I tried to spell out a biblical view of immigration. My column is up at afa.net. You won't see it on the front page of afa.net. You may have to click on the stand. It'll be on the top there, pull-down menu. Click at the top, just click on the stand, and you'll be able to see my column right there on immigration on the first page. But the point is that I was making here is Moses, leading the people of Israel through the desert, came up to the border of Edom. And he recognized the sovereign border of the kingdom of Edom. He asked for permission to pass through the territory of Edom. We're not going to touch anything. We're not going to take anything. I just want freedom to pass through. And the king of Edom said no. And Moses tried to negotiate with him, and he just refused. So just flat refused to give Israel passage. So, Moses had gone into battle, don't forget, against the Amalekites, stronger and mightier than Edom. And he had prevailed. So he wasn't afraid of Edom. He wasn't afraid of Edom's military might. But so what did Moses do? Did he decide to barge in? Did he decide to sneak in? Did he decide to hold a press conference and rail at the heartlessness and the cruelty of the king of Edom? No. Instead, Moses set an example for would-be immigrants throughout all of human history, including would-be immigrants at our southern border today. Edom refused to give Israel passage through his territory, so Israel turned away from him. That's what Moses did. You have a right to the sovereign control of your border, King of Edom. You have the right to decide who comes into your territory and who doesn't. If you've denied us passage, we are going to honor that. We are going to respect the authority that you have as the rightful king of Edom. And so Moses took the long way around rather than launching a border confrontation. And I would suggest, I've talked about this before, but I just want to revisit it, that we can learn everything we need to know from Revelation 3:20. You know, very familiar verse, and you might think, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens to me, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. What does that have to do with immigration? Well, I would suggest it has everything to do with immigration. In fact, I think everything we need to know about immigration we can learn from this verse. Now, what do we learn from this verse? Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. Well, the first thing we learn is that Jesus respected boundaries. He acknowledged that there was a boundary, a border, if you will, that stood between him and a man's life. That threshold represented a perimeter that in Jesus' mind had sacred significance. Not even the King of Glory would violate that border. Now, the second thing that we notice is that Jesus would not cross that legitimate boundary or border on his own. He would not cross without permission. Although he could have, he didn't power his way through that door. He didn't jimmy the lock. He didn't come in through the backyard. He didn't sneak in through a window. He didn't command that the door be opened to him. He went to the front door and knocked. He would not cross a legitimate border without permission. So whoever was on the other side of that door had sovereign authority over who came through it. And Jesus respected his right to grant or withhold the right of entry. So Jesus clearly wanted to come in. He sought permission to come in, but he would not enter until he was invited. If anyone opens the door, I will come in. And so in the Spirit of Christ, we as Americans are perfectly willing to invite into our society those who enter through the front door and become legal immigrants. We do that 1.6 million times a year. Our immigration policy is the most open-handed, open-hearted policy on earth. All that we ask is for immigrants to imitate the example of Jesus, to stand at the door and knock and wait to be invited in. And you can get those comments up at afa.net. Click on the stand at the top of that page. Well, let's take some phone calls. Let's take a call from Gail in Dyersburg, Tennessee. Gail, welcome. What's on your mind today?
Thank you for taking my call, Brian. I really appreciate your program.
Thank you.
Scripture verses come to my mind so many times throughout the course of the day because God's Word applies to everything. And with regard to Kennedy's leaving the Supreme Court, and we know that President Trump will appoint a pro-life. The man keeps his word no matter what's going on around him. President Trump will keep his word on this also as a pro-life justice coming in. We won't have to question his rulings. Scripture verse, don't grow weary in well-doing, because if you don't faint in due season, you will get what you're asking for. So I continue to pray without ceasing. That should be Commandment 11 and 12.
There you go. All right, Gail. And it is important that we not grow weary in doing good. The knock on us as evangelicals, you know what it is? The knock on us as evangelicals is that when we win, we quit. And when we lose, we quit. And the other side never does. Who do you think has the advantage? When they never quit and we drop out at the first sign of disappointment or trouble or reversal. All right, Gail, thank you for the call. I appreciate that. Let us grab a call from Iris in Rockwall, Texas. Iris, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Ryan, I was thrilled with all the wins. You reminded me of Donald Trump saying that we get tired of winning. I could hear him saying many times. That's awesome. And my comment and question is, do you think, I'm quite sure that he already has a short list of nominees because he would be aware that this would be likely. Do you think of anybody particularly that would be in the running, number one? And I know the Democrats will put up a huge battle, but the battle is the Lord's, as my precious sister before me said. And the bottom line is, I think that he will prevail. Do you?
I absolutely do. And I don't really have any idea. You know, Abe Hamilton suggested someone who is now on the appeals court, and I cannot remember her name. She had three names: Amy something Bennett, Barrett. I forget which.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Amy Coney Barrett. She's already been through a grilling on the Senate, and she passed, and is now on the appeals court today. And they tried to go after her because of her faith. I don't know, was Al Franken that was...
Al Franken,
Bernie
Feinstein,
Sanders?
and Bernie Sanders. I think it Bernie Sanders, but definitely Feinstein and Al Franken.
And they went after her hammer and tong on her faith, and she survived and is now on the appeals court. You know, and Abe's point was, hey, if she's already been through a grilling and the Senate has approved her for the appeals court bench, what would stop them from approving her for another judgeship? So she would make a good pick. So I really don't know. But I know that everybody on Trump's list has been vetted as an originalist and a constitutionalist. So I believe we are going to do just fine with whoever it is that he selects.
They're also throwing around the name Thomas Hardiman. He was the runner-up for the seat that Gorsuch got, so they're throwing that name around as well.
Okay, all right. But I believe we're going to get a good pick no matter which way we go. Let's grab a call from Levi. Levi in Baxley, Georgia. Welcome, Levi. What's on your mind?
All I do is thank you, first of all, for taking my call, because for us conservatives, there are so many different outlets that just oppress our voices, and so for you to actually listen to us is just very powerful.
You're welcome.
But what I would like to talk about is, I'm in college right now, and I've taken a lot of sociology courses and global issues courses and whatnot, and the common thread that I've noticed is this whole inclusivity around the world of trying to bring all the governments together and trying to all with the economy and all that kind of stuff, trying to bring everybody in together as one big economy and one big government. And the whole idea of borders is from God.
Mm-hmm.
It is a holy thing. It is ordained from God. And it says in Revelations that in the end days that people are going to come together and they're going to pretty much abolish their borders, and they're pretty much going to just all follow Satan. So I really feel that with this group pushing for that, whether they know it or not, they are doing the bidding of Satan in Revelations, where he talks about following him after abolishing all your borders and after coming together. And so I just like to think, I just like to hear what you think about that.
All right, Levi, that's a great call, and I agree with you. In fact, I would say quite simply, you can break all political ideologies down into two camps, whether right or left. There's basically only two ways you can go. Is you can believe in what's being called nationalism. I just call it patriotism. You can either believe in patriotism or you can believe in globalism. Globalism is just another word for one world government. You want there to be one government. You don't want nations. You detest the idea of nations. You think they breed competition, superiority, whatever. You are anti-nation. You want one big world government. That's why you love the United Nations. You want to see that thing turn into a global government. But those of us that believe in what some people call nationalism, I just call it patriotism. We just love our country. And we want other people around the world to love their country as much as we love ours. I want the people in France to be as proud of France as I am of America. I want the people in Germany to be as proud of Germany as I am of America. I don't begrudge them that. I don't wish them ill. I don't want them to fail at the World Cup. I don't take any pleasure if somebody fails. I want them to love their country, root for their country, just like we love and root for the United States. I mentioned that because Germany, I think, got washed out of the World Cup today. They're defending champions, so that's got to be brutal on the Germans.
By South Korea.
By South Korea.
Yeah, beat them 2-0. It was kind of in the end, the extra time, the added time.
Oh, added time. So that's really got to be tough. But so Levi's call is exactly right. You either are going to appreciate the idea of individual states, individual nations having their own government, forming the kind of government and the kind of country that they want to have. That's why I thought we should have left after we dethroned Saddam. We should have left because that's their country. They can build any kind of country they want. You can't build a democratic republic in a Islamic country. It's not possible. That wasn't our country. And we should just leave and tell them, look, you don't want us back here. Don't put another guy like Saddam in charge or we'll be back and bomb you back to the Stone Age. Other than that, have a great day, build whatever government you want. Just don't mess with us. Again, that's what we should have done. Focal Point, American Family Radio. Be right back.
Why does AFA keep harping on the dangers of the Netflix show 13 Reasons Why? It's because we've looked into the eyes of the mother of a teen suicide victim. Patrice Bright was mom to a normal, happy 14-year-old cheerleader dealing with the challenges any teenager faces. But her outlook on life was apparently darkened after she binge-watched season 1 of 13 Reasons Why. Anna Bright chose to deal with her temporary teen problems with the permanent act of suicide. Several other teens and young adults have made the same choice after watching this show, which glorifies suicide. The American Family Association and others have pointed out the dangers of the program to Netflix. But, apparently motivated by money, Netflix has just released season 2. Our hope is to save teen lives by getting Netflix to pull the series before another tragedy occurs. You can learn more and sign the 13 Reasons Why petition at afa.net.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Second hour, taking calls this hour. Please be patient. We'll get to you as soon as we can. 888-589-8840 is the number. A poll out of the state of Texas, only 26% of registered Texas voters have a favorable view of the NFL. The NFL has got, and that's in Texas. I mean, you got the Cowboys there, you got the Texans there. So we're only getting 26 favorable rating. They are not winning any friends with the way they've dithered around on the national anthem. I don't know if you saw the story out of San Francisco where there was a girl, an 8-year-old black girl. She was selling water, like from her own house. She was sitting in front of her own house on the sidewalk, and she was selling water to tourists. And there was another woman, a white woman, it turns out, who did not want her selling water without a permit. So she made like she was calling the police. We don't know if she actually called the police or just pretended to and talked loud enough that the girl thought she was calling the police. Well, that went viral because the mom came out and started videoing her calling the police on her 8-year-old daughter who was trying to make some money because her mom had lost her job. That's why she was out there selling water. So that was bad news for Permit Patty. And she was a CEO of a cannabis company, by the way. She had to resign. The PR was so bad on this that she had to resign from her San Francisco-based marijuana company. By the way, it's a company that produces cannabis products for both people and for pets. Did you guys know about that? That they make marijuana products for pets?
Why? Why would they do that?
I don't know.
There's money in it.
Dogs seem to me to be, pretty mellow. I mean, saw Chelsea over the weekend. That dog doesn't need nothing to get more relaxed. I can guarantee you that.
That's our dog, by the way.
Yeah, that's Jeff's dog. And I don't know if you saw this. Here's a picture of a guy. I printed it out without the picture, but a guy was on I-95. He was clinging to the hood of the car and he's talking on the telephone. He's hanging on to the hood of the car,
just
going down I-95 and just chatting with the other hand on a cell phone.
Probably ordering pizza or something.
Yeah, this is nuts.
70 miles an hour.
I'd be
70
on the phone
miles an hour.
with the police and the ambulance and everything else. That's what that phone call would be.
Hey, one hit of the brakes and he's a goner.
Hey, did you hear that they're trying to close down Route 66?
Well, I think a lot of it's kind of decaying and busted up. So they're putting it on the National Register of Historic Places, I think, maybe to try to propel local governments and states to kind of repave and rebuild. But that would be disappointing to have that go. A couple of more stories here, and then we'll get right back to the phones. You know, you've been concerned, as I have, about too much due process at the border, and that's exactly right. You know, Donald Trump saying we ought to apprehend him and send him right back home. I agree. Most of you do, too. We heard that on the phone on Monday. But everybody knows that the magic words are to ask for asylum because of a credible fear of persecution or violence. Those are the magic words, and the coyotes and the smugglers tell them that's what you say. Somebody apprehends you at the border, say, I've got a credible fear of violence, and you'll get an asylum hearing. And so whether you have a credible fear or not, that's what you say in order to get across the border. And about 90% of the people that say they've got a credible fear, that gets them inside the border. They pass the border with that, but only 20% ultimately get asylum. In other words, as Border Patrol people start talking to them, their story just completely breaks down and they're denied asylum. So all that time is being chewed up. And again, I think what we ought to do, as we talked about this the other day, you apprehend them at the border, you send them home. And you tell them as you're taking them back home, look, if you want to request asylum, go to a port of entry. We're no longer, I think we ought to just make it a policy, we are no longer going to accept asylum requests except at ports of entry. You try to steal into the country, break into the country, and ask for asylum, it's not going to be granted because we're not even going to consider them. If you come across illegally, not even going to be considered. We're just going to send you home. You got to go to a port of entry, or you got to go to one of the consulates in your own country.
Yeah, what if they do get a court hearing? Why couldn't we put some of the courts or put courts or hearing rooms right at the port of entry, and they would have to go back into Mexico and wait for their court date. Mm-hmm. You know how 75% of them don't show up for their court dates, and they're released into America. They never show up for the courts. This would encourage them to make their court date,
right, because that's the only shot.
And meanwhile, we wouldn't have to worry about housing them, separating them, or any of that.
Finding
I mean, that just might work.
I mean, right now they're out there looking for
pretty simple.
Yeah, they're out there looking for 5,000 judges right now. Where are they going to find 5,000 judges? Yeah. They're going to have to go get people off the street to come man these immigration courts. You know, and Mark Thiessen, looking at a piece by him on Fox News, saying, you know, the Democrats have just handed the president the upper hand again by going overboard on their attacks on Trump by playing the Hitler card, for example, and supporting catch and release. You know, American people do not support catch and release. And that's what Trump is going to be compelled to do if he follows this court order. Court said you can't separate, Trump said you can't separate children and parents. And the judge said you've got a limited amount of time to get these people processed or you got to turn them loose. So we're back to a catch and release policy which the American people do not like and but which the Democrats love. Only 19% of the American people support catch and release. 19%, 54% don't like separating families, but only 19% believe in catch and release. 44% believes that holding families together in detention until an immigration hearing is okay. And so if you can make that possible, the American people would support it, but the Democrats want catch and release. All right, let's go back to the phones, 888-589-8840. Let's grab a call from Shelley in Alpine, Texas. Shelley, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me. Shelley, are you with me? Oh, that's my bad. Shelley, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you for taking my call.
You at?
I am usually an optimist. I'm usually a glass half full kind of person, but with Jeff Flake as a so-called Republican senator, how can we be optimistic about getting anything done when the Democrats are just obstructing and the Republicans can't pull together? I think it's a miracle that we got Neil Gorsuch.
Absolutely.
Can we expect or hope for another 2 miracles in a row?
Well, Shelley, I tell you, I absolutely believe we're going to get another Neil Gorsuch. I mean, I think the scrutiny of this next nominee is even going to be greater by the Trump people than it was for Gorsuch, because they want to make absolutely sure that they get this right, because they know this is a once-in-a-generational opportunity. So they're not going to take a chance on somebody. They're not going to take a chance on somebody that doesn't have a clear judicial record of conservatism on the bench. So yes, Shelley, a lightning is going to strike twice when it comes to the Supreme Court. That's what I believe. And I'll tell you, Shelley, our optimism needs to be, well, I mean, outside of being in God, which is obviously where it always needs to be, but the base of our optimism needs to be in Trump, not in the Republicans, because Trump is continuing to bear down. He's continuing to get it done. And I think that's where hope has to be. He's trying to shame the Republicans into getting rid of that fake-a-buster. I think it might happen. But Trump's the guy, Shelley, who's pursuing the agenda. The Republicans aren't very enthusiastic. They're not cooperating. They're trying to block him. Mitch McConnell will not get rid of the fake-a-buster. That one thing is cobbling up all kinds of legislation. But McConnell did get rid of the fake-a-buster under pressure when it came to nominations of the Supreme Court. So we can get a Supreme Court judge nominated with 51 votes. And I'll tell you, Shelley, I think even Jeff Flake is going to have a really, really hard time. If he's the one guy that's blocking the Trump's judicial nomination, he's going to be blistered from everybody from one end of the country to the other. Jeff Flake, I think, he wants to have everybody like him. He wants everybody to think he's a maverick. He wants everybody to admire him for being an independent dude. He goes that route. There is nobody in America that's going to have any use for him, so I don't think he will do it. All right, Shelley, thanks for the call, and continue to see that glass is half full. Let's go to Brian in Port Lavaca, Texas. Brian, welcome. What's on your mind?
Doing well. Nice name, by the way.
You are welcome. You spell it with an I or a Y?
With an I.
Okay, well, you can't have everything, but that's close. All right, go ahead, Brian. What's on your mind?
Anyway, I just want to basically comment on your immigration, and I agree with you. I apologize. I haven't read your article, so you may have covered something. But one of the people that's in the Bible that a lot of people haven't talked about, which I think is a great example of how to immigrate to a place, is Ruth. When Ruth's husband died and her husband's brother died also, Naomi told them, well, why don't you go back to Moab, and I'm returning to my country, to Israel. And Orpah went ahead and left, but Ruth was adamant that she wanted to immigrate there, and she said, and I quote, "Your lodge will be my lodge, your people will be my people, your God will be my God." And she came in and adopted all of that. She adopted Israel's ways. She didn't come in demanding. She didn't come in illegally and also demanding. No, I'm coming in, but you take my ways. You adopt my ways. So I'm coming in and I'm going to adopt your ways, the ways of your people. I'm going to be an Israelite.
Yeah.
And she went on to become a descendant of Jesus Christ. I mean
an ancestor.
I think is powerful in the way that it shows in the Bible how to immigrate. I mean, literally, that's how you immigrate legally. You come and you adopt the ways of the nation. You come in legally and you adopt the ways of the nation. And that's why I have such an issue with the illegal immigration. Not only do they come in illegally, but then they come in and they want us to basically allow them to do as they please or adopt their ways or, get by with breaking the law.
Yeah,
And,
they want us. They want us to adapt to them rather than expecting them to adapt to our culture and our values. All right, Brian, that is a great call. I expected nothing less from a guy with your name. Thank you for that. And I haven't talked about Ruth much this time around, but I have used that example, the one that Brian mentioned of Ruth. This is how you assimilate. It's a beautiful story of assimilation. And again, as Brian pointed out, she adopted the God of her host country, adopted their ways, their values, didn't expect Israel to allow her to put an altar to the false god of Molech up on some mountaintop. No, if she came to Israel, she was expected. In fact, it's even in the law, the Mosaic law, she would be expected to observe the religion of the Jews, stop their sacred holidays. We'll be right back with more. Stay with us.
Is God calling you to pursue theological graduate education? What's keeping you from taking the first step? Is it time? What if you could choose from flexible class options? Is it money? What if competitively priced seminary offered academic scholarships? Do you think you're alone? What if your classmates were just like you, balancing careers and families with seminary? Hello, I'm Dr. John Nyhoff, president of Wesley Biblical Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi. Take the first step. Visit wbs.edu.
Who is God? What is He like? How can we know? Your answer to these questions will impact your worship, discipleship, apologetics, and evangelism. Learn from Ravi Zacharias, Josh McDowell, Chip Ingram, and more than 60 other speakers at Southern Evangelical Seminary's 25th Annual National Conference on Christian Apologetics. It's October 12th and 13th in Charlotte, North Carolina. Get the early bird discount when you register by August 1st at ses.edu.
American Family Radio and Preborn are partnering to help save babies' lives throughout America.
Well, my name is Dan Steiner, and I'm the president of Preborn. Ultrasound truly is a game changer. When a mom comes into a pregnancy center under pressure to abort her child, perhaps the dad's gone, perhaps her mother is pressuring her. Most of the time in her heart she doesn't want to abort, but what she needs is something that will give her the strength to choose life against the pressures forcing her to consider abortion. That's the ultrasound. If she hears her baby's heartbeat and sees that baby on ultrasound, 80% of the time she'll choose life.
Be a compassionate answer to abortion and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com now. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point. Brian Fisher.
Howdy, welcome back to Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Glad to have you in the conversation. Let's go to Lee in Bryan, Texas, and that is spelled with a Y. So, Lee, maybe there's not much you can do about your name, but you sure picked the right place to be from. Lee from Bryan, Texas. Brian with the Y, what's on your mind? Talk to me.
Howdy, Mr. Fisher. Yeah, well, we're in the Holy Land. It's Aggie land, so,
Yeah, close enough.
Well, I was just calling because I just wanted to say I agree with the last caller about his example in Ruth. Being Hispanic myself, I agree. My father came to the United States during the Reagan years, and he assimilated into the United States. And we haven't forgotten our culture, but we have become Americans because I was born here and all of that. And so, yeah, I agree with the last caller. But I do have to say I disagree with you on your application of Revelation 3:20. I feel that, and I understand where you're coming from, that our Lord is gracious and merciful and kind, but I feel that in its context, he's calling the people in the Laodicean church to repent. And ultimately, I feel that is the heart of the immigration debate, is not so much, all of the mudslinging. It's the heart of the gospel. Why are these individuals doing this? it's because they have no light, and I feel that we need to be kind. We need to respect our laws because of what Paul says in Romans 13. He says every person is to be in subjugation to the governing authorities. So there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. So I think that's really what we need. We need to emphasize to all immigrants, not just the Hispanic people. So thank you.
Okay, good, Lee. I appreciate the call. And Revelation 3:20 is not even a verse about salvation. It is a verse, as Lee pointed out, it's a verse about fellowship. The Laodicean church needed to repent in order to get back into fellowship with Christ, and that's what he is inviting them to do. Okay, good call, Lee. I appreciate that. Let's grab a quick call from Dwayne in Fort Carson, Colorado. Dwayne, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher, for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I want to say I read your article. You're totally dead on. I agree with you 100% on that. And I think what most Americans fail to understand is that, like you say, the Quran, Muslims are called to kill us infidels. We either convert or we die. There is no in between. There is no, like you said, your research said, there was like 25%, Muslims that are, the ones we don't know, they're really, the horrible ones. Well, we don't know who they are. You know what I mean? So we have to do exactly like you say. We have to control that. Just like you said, we do discriminate. Not all discrimination is bad. We discriminate against murderers, child molesters, and everything like that. So there is good discrimination, and it is lawful to do that. The Bible even says we.
Okay, Dwayne, thank you for the call. I appreciate that. And Dwayne is talking about my column that's up today. We talked about my column from yesterday on immigration. The column that Dwayne's referring to is a column that's up today on the stand. You can go to afa.net right now and find it on the homepage there of afa.net. And it's about the decision that the Supreme Court made on Trump's travel ban. I have no problem calling it a Muslim travel ban because that's primarily what it is. Now, North Korea's on the list and Venezuela's on the list. I think they were probably added, frankly, to try to blunt the accusation this is just a Muslim travel ban. But what the court ruled is that the Constitution and the law give the president unilateral authority, and this is true. We've read excerpts from the law to you before. The Constitution gives to Congress the authority to control the migration of persons. Article 1, Section 9, that's in the control of the Congress. And remember, only Congress can enact legislation. So the Supreme Court has no authority over immigration at all. They don't have the capacity to enact legislation. They might be able to issue a ruling in a particular case that has to do with the law that is passed by Congress. But Congress grants authority. The Constitution grants to Congress the authority to enact legislation. Congress has used that authority to enact the law that grants the president sole power. I mean, he can do it unilaterally on his own to decide who gets to come in this country and who doesn't. If the president decides that there is a group of aliens that in his judgment alone, he doesn't have to get permission from his cabinet, he doesn't have to get permission from Congress. If he deems, that's the word, if he deems on his own that there's a group of aliens that represent, that would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he can ban immigration to them on his own, just by issuing a proclamation that doesn't have to go through Congress. He can issue a proclamation prohibiting legislation to whatever group of aliens he thinks represent a detriment to the interests of the United States, and that has the force of the Constitution, the force of law. And the Constitution and the Supreme Court, frankly, finally agreed with the Constitution, says yes, the president does exactly have that kind of authority. And people are making a big deal about this is anti-Muslim, it's religious discrimination. Well, there is no religious right to immigrate to the United States. It does not exist. There's no religious right. Nobody has a right to immigrate to the United States. It is a privilege, and it is not a right. So your religion doesn't qualify you or disqualify you by itself from entering the United States. It could, but automatically it does not. would-be immigrants considered on his own merit. So there's no Muslim right to immigrate to the United States. We are free to discriminate against anybody whose worldview would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, and the worldview of Islam is detrimental to the interests of the United States because it is a totalitarian ideology. There's not a single right in the First Amendment that is protected under the Quran or under Islam. There's no freedom of religion, there's no freedom of the press, there's no freedom of speech, there's no freedom to peaceably assemble, there's no freedom to petition the government for the redress of grievances, does not exist. So it's a totalitarian ideology which is absolutely contradictory and in conflict with every major social and civil right that we cherish in America, just like communism. That's why communism is illegal in America and why communists cannot immigrate. If they're known communists, they cannot immigrate into the United States. And we must not forget that Islam cherishes an overt hatred of and animosity toward anything remotely Christian or Jewish. Remember, they are told to slay the idolaters wherever you find them. That's a quote from the Quran. And to cut off our heads. That's also a direct quote from the Quran. And so that's why, again, I think Muslims should be prohibited from immigration to the United States, because there's a basic animus in their worldview toward Christianity, and this is a Christian nation, a Judeo-Christian nation, which is why we have always been friends of the Jews. Islam is not like that. As Winston Churchill said, there is no stronger retrograde force in the world than Islam. Now, remember, the African countries, when they had the Ebola virus, they banned immigration from any African country that had an Ebola outbreak. Not because everybody that wanted to come into their country had the virus. They didn't know, but they said, we can't tell. We can't tell the difference between those who do and don't. We're going to have to be careful with them all. I believe we need to do the same thing. So the Constitution, the law, the Supreme Court has said Donald Trump can ban immigration from Muslims if he wants, and maybe it's time to do that very thing. All right, let's grab a call from Mrs. Ruth in Pontotoc. Welcome, Mrs. Ruth. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Hi there, Brother Brian. Y'all talking about wonderful Ruth in the Bible. I would only hope I could do what she did. Anyway, I have a few comments. I've got to kind of fun with you about something. I thought you'd get a kick out of this. The other day when I called in and was talking about something, and I said, well, why don't they send them back? So I think President Trump is listening to your program regularly.
We hope so.
He implemented that afterward, about 2 days after that program was aired. And I remember you saying, yeah, there's more of that going on than you realize. Well, anyway, also, I'd like to say, how about another thought could be, although this would be, I would feel sorry for the immigrants, but how about delegating them out to some of these Democrats and having them live with them? That would change their tune. And also, the Democrats need to be reading the Bible, first off. But Boundaries is a wonderful book that everybody ought to read. And I would like to ask you a question. If President Trump could implement to send the immigrants back, which is going to be very costly for us to do that as well, why is it the border wall? Can't he just order the border wall to be built? And I'll let you respond.
Thank you, Ruth. I appreciate that. You know, it's interesting when you talk about just ordering the border wall to be built. By the way, your mention about sponsorship, I think that's a critical factor, because it used to be you had to have a sponsor in the United States. If you wanted to immigrate, you had to have a sponsor here who would accept responsibility for you so that you would not be a burden to the state. We ought to go back to that. That's where I think churches could get involved in the legal immigration process. I think churches would be willing to accept responsibility for a family, a Christian family that would like to immigrate to the United States. They would assume responsibility for them so they would not become a burden on the state. But you know, one of the things that people are talking about is let's have the military build a wall. They've got a whole branch of the military, the Seabees. That's what they do, is build stuff. Let's have them build it. Good suggestion. That's it for today. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, we are fighting a winnable war. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way. If we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at AFA.